We're going to focus on the other absolute levels. These absolute levels, these absolute inflection areas can and should be different in different markets. I give you kind of a basic template to put up. You can find some levels that make sense. So on a day like this, what does this tell us about the level of energy in this market? I would argue that on a market that stays essentially within 2,500 to minus 2,500, it's kind of low energy. You just don't have any one side of the tape that dominates enough and continues to dominate enough to take the delta outside of certain ranges. In the S&P, 10K is a wonderful, if the market is rip roaring and trending in terms of price, and we get to that 10K inflection, it is a ridiculously good signal. Whether or not we fail from there, and maybe there's a contextual order flow shift that occurs from an absolute inflection, or whether we're able to get through there. It's no different than the read and the way that we read it when the delta neutral topic. We're now just adding a couple of other areas that are not as important as delta neutral, but can still be helpful both in reading energy, the level of energy, which gives us meaningful insight into trend continuation, just like I walked through right here. And they can just be tiny little signals that you can use to say, okay, we were able to get through XYZ threshold. That is going to have me, there's not been some kind of contextual shift. We now get through that next kind of threshold. There's energy here. I want to continue almost as framing as this is contextual order flow. It's framing a bit of context for maybe saying I want to continue to look for longs as I scalp and do different things. And that's really all there is to say about the third and final contextual order flow piece. So real quick, just to summarize. We have delta neutral. We have specific, above or below with delta neutral, which is a minor point. We have a very important delta neutralization events. We have contextual order flow shift events. And we have inflections with major absolute levels, which can and should be adapted kind of market to market. So now we shift gears. It's been an hour and a half. Let's take a 5-minute break. It's at the bottom of the hour right here. So we'll see you in 5 minutes and we'll kick off short-term order flow signals. All right, so let's dive into short-term order flow. We have order flow shifts. We have late rotation capitulation. We have divergences, which is a form of basic weakness. And then we have absorption. We'll start theoretical with each and then go to real charts, just like we did before with contextual. Order flow shifts, it's really like the contextual order flow shifts that we went through, just on a rotation to rotation basis, right? It's like putting the zigzag indicator on rhythm, on order flow, to get a sense of where there is some kind of an order. I can't talk. A shift in momentum, right? Like let's say this is instead of price the other day, let's say this is delta. And okay, there is a shift from this upward trajectory. Something shifted, right? And then we're heading down. Now, it's not going to be perfect like I first drew it, right? There's going to be little blips and stuff along the way. But the question is, can you kind of define some form of pattern to where once there is some semblance of a move, you can identify that there's enough of a shift in momentum. There's always little, here's a shift in momentum, right? Down, up, down, right? Is there enough of a shift in momentum to call it a short-term order flow shift? Now, believe it or not, I am not a huge fan of at all times needing order flow shifts to take trades. Getting a little ahead of myself here. We're going to talk a lot about trading and execution. Then I'm going to trade and execute for you all week. I don't always require order flow to shift to tell me to get into a trade, at least on the trading time frame, delta type of view. I might see something starting to happen, see something start to happen, and pounce really quickly. Most times, right after I'm in an entry, I'm kind of looking for maybe the shift to really start to kind of confirm, right, that I've timed it really nicely. So we'll talk more about that later. In general, it is a good idea to be able to see where there's short-term shifts in order flow. And it doesn't matter what day we pick or go to, we will be able to find those. And they're a dime a dozen. They are absolutely a dime a dozen. They're all over the place. You can obviously go find the ones that worked the best. What if I just said, oh, here's a shift, right? We were heading down. Here's a shift. And I just said, oh, look, here's the shift, right? Because we could say something like that. That's great. There's other times, and that worked with a beautiful movement, right? There's other times where we could say either here is a shift if you go like kind of direct movement, or you could smooth it out and say, well, that's kind of a shift of this rhythm. You could definitely say, here's the bullish shift, right? Right there. And then this doesn't result in an immediate downward movement from where we found that shift. Just like I keep saying with everything, just because you find some kind of a shift. What if you're stalking longs from this point forward? Just because you find a shift doesn't mean that it's impactful. Nice little downward, 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 and then boom, there's an amount of buying right there. That's a shift. And I'm assuming maybe it was just this blip. Let me turn on my global crosshair. Yes, it was. It was just that little move right there. So if you buy that shift, you're kind of buying that high right there and getting stopped out. Right? Same goes for, let's say that we're still in a sequence of pursuing that and continuing to do that in this sequence, and we say, all right, let's, we'll buy this shift or something, right? We'll look at it like that. Here's the shift. Well, again, you're going to end up kind of buying maybe into these highs. Beautiful rhythm, down move, stop run, and a short-term order flow shift confirming buyers are trying to take it right here. Doesn't work. Stopped out, however you end up stopping. But I just want us to be aware. It's kind of the basics. It almost doesn't need to be stated, but of these short-term order flow shifts where you can look on a very short-term basis to see kind of bar to bar or rotation to rotation who's in control. That's different than looking at a series of trendiness of mini rotations, right? For contextual read, this is the short-term read. Late rotation capitulation is pretty sweet. It is where you have, let's, you know, we're always going to look at price and order flow, but sometimes I'm just drawing these examples from an order flow perspective. We'll draw both. And I'm going to draw delta as bars from here forward, just to make the point. Big bullish bar right there. Merit, isn't this bar of really, really strong, aggressive buyers looking under the hood and saying, hey, this last up bar here in price is really strong. You know, it matters where it happens within the rotation. And once we use our rhythm tools on price to determine we are quite late in a rotation, clearly quite late, not just maybe, clearly quite late, and you see a big burst of aggressive behavior continuing to try to push that market further, a lot of times that is what we refer to as a late rotation capitulation. Fantastic signal. They don't happen all over the place. Let's go see if we can find some. Y'all might have to help me. That's decent. It's nothing crazy. There's a decent effort right there late in the rotation, but we can find much better examples than that. Let's see, 918. Well, certainly, absolutely. So we're long in. This will be a case of ones that didn't end up forming tops, but we'll kind of be. We're not quite haven't covered all the topics yet to digest exactly what happened into the ultimate high here. Some of you can guess there's a kind of a divergence that occurs, but absolutely this would be considered late rotation capitulation. As you see these kind of outsized, really strong bars, kind of one here, but that's more so just a bit of stop run delta through here, but it is a little bit late in the rotation. It's just kind of been grinding up on small delta bars, and then boom, by the time we're up here, you're seeing a big push. Kind of happens right here into this high. But again, there are some much better examples. Let's go to today, see if we can find something. They're not super easy. This may have been one where it made sense to find some in hindsight to show you. They start to look like it, but it's not really truly late in a rotation, but it could be seen as one. They're much more obvious than what we've seen so far. They're really large relative to surrounding bars. I would say this would be one, but honestly, it's a bit more of just the same. There's no actually capitulation. Here, here is one, guys. Here's one where we have this nice rotation. We're going higher, going higher, going higher, and we get to this bar, which begins. Let's zoom in. Let's zoom in. Let's zoom in. Just for teaching purposes. So this is one of the larger bars that we can see on this entire chart. So it needs to be significant. Look at here. Here's another one. Those are some of the biggest bars we can find on this chart in terms of delta. And where did they occur? Where did this bar open? This bar opened right there. Covered it up. Sorry. Capitulates, and you kind of start to see the reversal. Same thing goes for this one. It's a little capitulatory, and then all of a sudden, at least it's kind of drying up. There's no more selling that occurred. There's a short-term order flow shift following the capitulation. We got some examples coming in. That'll be fun. So 11.7. Please quote things in Central Time. 11.7, 13.42. Nope. There's a big, strong short-term order flow shift right there, but it is not capitulatory into the low, which is what. Now, again, maybe we have different time zones going on here. We have NQ Friday the 8th at 13:44. Nope. This is we could come back to this at a different 12:44. A little bit. I think I pointed this one out earlier. It's a little bit more of the same. This bar is not really outsized compared to what's been going on. There's actually a different dynamic. I wish we were ready to talk about all the examples. There's several that I want to come back to. They're perfect examples of other things happening. In this case, some really strong absorption. There's one. Look at this. Well, it meets my test. It really does. You it's just slightly bigger than most of these other bars, and you get a really sharp shift the other way. It's really late in a rotation. It's a decent example there. Tough going finding really big examples of this here. What about this guy? Look at that. That's a really nice example. So now we're actually combining two things. I know this trade didn't end up working in any major way, but this is a really nice twofold example of a big. So we have this rotation all the way down, and then look at how big that delta is. And what does that do? That's not a place where it creates more downward movement. It creates the low. And unfortunately, there's no buyers coming off of this, right? What doesn't happen? What's not happening here off this delta neutral? The buyers aren't confirming this was that example we walked through earlier where it took them a while. This kind of looks like one here. Not a glaring example, but still above average buying into the exact high. There's not been a lot of this that has occurred lately. A couple's on some of these lows right here. If you take a look, kind of smaller delta bars, and then a decently